So this presentation is mainly trying to look at any difference between human beings, the self of the human being, and the so-called AI robots or humanoids, or uh, that is basically a combination and a new technology that is being developed. It is still developing, but the future seems to be very promising for some who are very enthusiastic about this technology, and the future seems to be also terrifying for others. Now, the difference between human beings and the machine has been debated since the 90s, since the 90s or even earlier. But in the Arabic and Islamic world, it is rather a new thing. So not many people have talked about transhumanism, which is that trend, that philosophy which encourages or which promotes the kind of enhancement of human beings in order to reach a certain state where humans are have unlimited, or that there is no limit to their life expectancy, to their physical ability, and to their intelligence. Um, Dr. Huraira actually was one of the first that I encountered. His article about transhumanism, which sparked many discussion. And I have read also a paper that was written by one of his friends or colleagues, uh, which was one of the first papers to be written from an Islamic perspective to defend this philosophy, which is called transhumanism. Transhumanism, which means that they are basically looking at the future, and they are trying, those who are promote transhumanism, they believe that it is time to take the biological evolution in our hands. So they are trying to interfere in the evolution of human beings, hoping that in the future we will be able to achieve a kind of entity that is still maybe called humans or transhumans, but that goes beyond, that has capabilities that go far beyond what the human beings can achieve. Well, so indeed, this very long ago, like even in the 80s, actually in 1980, a philosopher called John Searle wrote a paper about trying to see the difference, or arguing for the difference between the possibility that was not there yet, but the possibility of having a conscious machine, a machine that is conscious. Basically, this idea that is called the Chinese room thought experiment is where the philosopher is showing that even if the machine shows intelligence, and even if it shows understanding, it does not really understand. Even if it shows consciousness, or that behaves as if it is conscious, it doesn't really have conscious. Also, there is the idea of Thomas Nagel. What is it like to be a bat? Is basically arguing that there is a difference between showing that you know, or studying the scientific characteristics of a bat, and knowing his characteristics, the way it behaves, and between understanding and feeling what does it really mean to be a bat, knowing what does it really mean to be a bat. So actually, in the Western culture, the idea that of the possibility of a conscious machine has long been debated, and of course there are arguments and counter arguments for and against the idea that the machines can ever be conscious. Why is that important? Like when we think, like, why is it that really important? And why do many Muslims, except few, actually argue against transhumanism? From my point of view, it is important because not only because the human beings is depicted in the religion of Islam as being like the best of creations, not because the human beings has a soul and other things like machines, they don't have a soul, but it is very important for moral and social reasons. Very important to distinguish humans from this thinking machine or the so-called thinking machines for moral and social reasons. If in the future these robots, AI robots, are developed who possess a kind of intelligence that exceeds human intelligence, most probably this will lead to the creation of species, of entities that are intelligent, but their intelligence is different than human intelligence. And that can lead to a kind of racism that is embedded in the Western culture since the beginning of modernity, or even before that. So that is the main reason why I joined the people who are arguing against transhumanism and against the view that a machine can be conscious. It has to be given certain rights, like human rights, and that we have to acknowledge that and respect it. Well, in front of us in this image, you can see like the robots that is called Sophia. And this is like the first humanoid robot. In 2017, to our surprise, Saudi Arabia gave it a citizenship. This is something that is not given very easily, even to normal human beings. On the right also, we can see the picture of a famous Japanese scientist who was the first to create a robot that looks exactly like him, hoping that this will help him to send his replica or his robot to different culture to help him in spreading his ideas and to kind of release him of some responsibilities. Anyways, so to reiterate, transhumanism is a movement of people who believe in the power of technology to transform the human race. According to Ray Kurzweil, and Ray Kurzweil is a famous philosopher that is sometimes called the prophet of transhumanism. He is the one who predicted the internet 10 years before it came to be. He says consciousness is a pattern of information. So for him, consciousness is just a pattern of information. It does not reside in the hardware of our brains, the cells and atoms and neurons, which are always changing, but in the computational patterns that make up our sensory systems, our attention system, and our memories, which together from the distinctive algorithm that we think of as our identity, which together form the distinctive algorithm that we think of as our identity. This can, at least in theory, be transferred, according to Ray Kurzweil and other transhumanists, onto a computer. Of course, this is like one idea, and there are also other ideas of or other definitions of consciousness among the transhumanist philosophers. However, that it is a pattern of information is a very strong idea that is shared by Ray Kurzweil and Nick Bostrom, I think, and many others. Now, according to Ray Kurzweil, who wrote many books on the topic, the last one written 2 years ago, the only way to survive as humans, he thinks, is to begin merging our bodies with these technologies, transforming ourselves into a new species, what Kurzweil calls, what he calls post-humans or spiritual machines at the age of spiritual machines. Indeed, what makes transhumanism so compelling is that it promises to restore through science the transcendent and essentially religious hopes, the transcendent and essentially religious hope. That's why it has been considered by some to be a kind of religion, scientific religion, because it promises things that usually the people who belong to different religions believe in. And the following paragraph is actually taken from Ali Ghandour's article that I mentioned earlier. He says, dreams of a life free from illness, supernatural abilities, or even immortality have often been projected onto the afterlife in the past, as humanity lacked both the technological foundation and the capacity for futuristic thinking. It was only through the scientific and technological advances of the 19th and 20th centuries that these visions became more tangible and consequently part of contemporary transhumanist discourse. So basically, what that says is that the heaven can now be achieved on earth. That when we thought of the heaven as a place where we will be not sick, they will have supernatural abilities, we will be immortal in the heaven. This is now, according to him, in the transhumanist era, something that we can achieve on earth. Well, if we go back to the Quran, and by the way, I can't see my notes, so I can see only the PowerPoint the presentation. I can't see my notes, but anyways, I will try to remember what I have written here. Of course, when we talk about the position of Islam or the ideas of Muslims regarding transhumanism, we need to start from our sacred text, from the scripture. And the most important sacred book of the Muslims is, of course, the Holy Quran. If we look at the book itself and how it depicts human beings, we'll see that the Quran actually uses terms like insan, which literally means human, nafs, which is sometimes translated to the soul, or sometimes humans as well, ruh, and al-mir, person. Those terms actually refer to different ontological dimensions of human beings. Mainly, nafs refers to the human self or person, so it is not used as in the Quran. It is not always used to mean a soul. It is not meant to be the soul, although many theologians, Muslim theologians, kind of think nafs and the soul are the same thing. But the Quran uses the word ruh. Ruh is usually translated to the spirit or the soul, that spiritual entity that resides within human beings, and according to many is the what is going to live forever, that is going to be immortal, that is going to go to heaven. So ruh in the Quran is actually not depicted in this way. Ruh is the breath of life, since Allah blew, as the Quran mentions, of his ruh into Adam, giving life to Adam's body. A human self in philosophical theology, kalam, and when we talk about philosophical theology, like kalam is sometimes translated to philosophical theology, sometimes simply to theology, speculative theology. And in kalam, unlike in theology proper, we can see that there are many concepts that are not necessarily directly related to theology. It's not only about divinity and the attributes of the divine, but we can find in the Kalam works many ideas and concepts that relate to different topics that we usually find in philosophy. So early theologians, I would say until the late 5th century, which is around 11th century, 11th century of the Common Era, early theologians, all of them, without exception, I think, emphasize the corporeal bodily nature of the human self. That includes the Ash'ari and also the Mu'tazila. It is this whole and composite body, Jumla, that is alive and able and not something in it or above it. So when asked like about the meaning of human being or what is meant by what is being human, they would point to the composite body, jumla. And when we say like jumla, that means all of the human being, not only the physical body, but all of the human being with all its capacity and ability, its senses, and so on. Now, the falasifa, so there are like mainly three different ideas. Those who emphasized the body of the human being, and the falasifa who emphasize the soul, and those who are considered to be dualist, and those who are the ones who turned away from this non-dualistic theory of man towards a philosophically influenced body-soul dualism. Philosophically influenced because, like the falasifa who follow the Greek tradition, including Al-Kindi, Farabi, Ibn Sina, and others, understood the soul, the essence of the human being, to be the soul of the human being, in line with Neoplatonic philosophy. An-nafs as spiritual incorporeal entity, which is higher and nobler than the body. So that is the essence of the human being. While the early theologians emphasize the importance of the whole of human body. Dualists later on kind of built on the philosophers, and they turned away from this non-dualistic theory of man towards philosophically influenced body-soul dualism. Actually, when we talk about dualism and non-dualism here, this classification into those who emphasize the body and those who emphasize the soul and those who are dualist shouldn't be understood as simplistic as it looks. Actually, the early theologians who emphasized the importance of the body in addition to the soul, they kind of emphasized the unity of the human being. They were not dualist. They emphasized like that the whole, that a human body is a whole. And we cannot see this position, we cannot interpret it as being like a materialist understanding of a human being. There is a big difference between the position of those early theologians and the materialist understanding of human beings that emphasizes that the human brain, for example, is simply can be imitated in technology and so on. This non-dualist of the early theologian, who emphasized the importance of body and soul, included, as I mentioned before, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, after whom the Ash'ari school of Kalam was named, and Abu Hudayl al-Allaf, one of the important Mu'tazilite figures. Um, and they held that man is this visible body that is composed in this manner of composition and structured in this type of specific structure. Well, it is important to remember that one of the tensions that existed very early in Islamic theology and philosophy is related to the true nature of the human being, that part of the human that gives a human being his or her identity, and that will be preserved in the afterlife. So, mainly the philosophers emphasize the idea that it is only the soul that is going to be preserved and that this material body will end, there will be nothing because it is the soul, and that the resurrection at the day of judgment will be in soul only. This non-dualist early theologian emphasized that the essence, the identity of human beings is linked to the human body. And on the day of judgment, the resurrection will happen not only in soul, but in body and soul, or it will happen to the human being as a unity. Right. Also, Ibn Arabi, the famous Sufi philosopher, describes the belief that body and soul could truly exist separately as one of the greatest errors of some philosophers and some theologians, Ahl al-Nadar, he says. He is particularly critical of philosophers who seek to transcend corporeality and regard the intelligible world as superior. For Ibn Arabi, conscious being is only possible in a physical form, both in this world and in the afterlife. See, those ideas actually that I am talking about are kind of shared with the people who are interpreting this view as being a materialistic view. But my idea, the main idea of this presentation is that this is something that shows that transhumanism is actually not possible, even if we take the understanding of the early theologians of the nature of human beings, because the essence of transhumanism, regardless of what they say, is the essence of transhumanist understanding of the human self is actually dualistic. Why I say that? Because as we have seen before, Kurzweil and others emphasize the possibility of uploading the human mind. And what does uploading the human mind mean other than the possibility of uploading the essence, or what they think is the essence of the human being? So that information that can be uploaded is very similar to the beliefs that a human being has a soul and a body, but the soul here is what is important, that will continue to survive. And they think that by uploading the human mind, they are actually making human beings immortal and transcending the limits of the time and space. Right. Non-dualist understanding of human self, to reiterate, the view of the early Muslim theologian should not be understood as a reductionist approach that explains human beings solely through biology or neuroscience. When the self comprises the whole of the human body, al-jumla, machines cannot replicate it and still retain the fundamental characteristics of the human self. What distinguishes humans from machines is not that they have an immaterial self. What distinguishes humans from machines is not that they have an immaterial self, but that their bodies their flesh is intrinsically related to their self-awareness, subjective experience, and consciousness, and understanding that the early Muslim theologians definitely shared. If we accept the notion that the essence of the human being lies in an immaterial self, a consciousness that can exist independently of the body, carrying with it memory, subjective experience, and self-awareness, then it becomes conceivable to describe this self in terms of information patterns. If every element of awareness could be mapped, digitized, and uploaded into a computational system, one might argue that the boundaries between human consciousness and artificial intelligence begin to dissolve. In such a view, the mind would no longer be a uniquely human phenomenon, but a transferable structure of information replicable within machines. So, as mentioned earlier, the only article that defends transhumanism from an Islamic perspective, written by Ali Ghandour, argues that it is this trend of non-dualist perception of the nature of humans that is compatible with transhumanist approach. However, he disregards the transhumanist popular notion that the mind is software running on the brain hardware, which is itself a form of dualism. Well, I don't want to stay too long, and so the aim of this presentation was trying to find out what is essential to being human that AI robots cannot share. Inspired by early theologians, I tried to move beyond the mere doctrinal assertion that humans have a soul and robots don't. What does it mean to be a human? Like, what does it mean to have a soul is an urgent question. The question that requires a revival of engagement with philosophical theology or ilm al-kalam, since technological attempts to enhance human beings that emphasize quantifiable traits like intelligence and efficiency can lead to a diminished appreciation for other aspects of humanity, such as emotional depth, spiritual experiences, ethical intuitions, moral agency, and all that requires an embodied self, a human being with the body, with desires, with emotions, with perception, with an understanding of morality. That is all, and thank you for listening.